this morning, just about 20 minutes toward the top of the hour. I'm Sarah Colvin, and joining me live on the phone, I welcome our Cape and Island State Senator, Dan Wolf. Senator Wolf, good morning.
Good morning, Sarah. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
Less humidity and I would be perfect.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's raining right now in Barnstable, so we're hoping that that's going to cool things off a little bit.
Yeah, I think cooler weather, cooler times ahead. We'll be wishing it was this again in about 4 months. So.
You know it, exactly. So I would cherish it while we can. So Dan, wanted to talk, understand the Labor and Workforce Development held a hearing on bills related to workplace safety and workplace discrimination. Some interesting topics of discussion, many people in attendance. Gender diversity and gender equality, I know on boards is one of those kind of fascinating topics.
Well, Sarah, I have to say that one of the best parts of this job is the hearings. And so we had a hearing 2 weeks ago, a week before last, or just after you and I spoke last, actually. And we had over 500 people there. And I'll tell you, one of the things I keep hearing from the business community is that, why do we need to legislate minimum wage? Why do we need to legislate earn sick time? Why do we need laws? Aren't people doing this on their own? Doesn't the market cure things? And I'll tell you, if I could have just beamed everybody into the hearing we had last week on the bills that you just mentioned, I think people would feel differently. I cannot believe how little progress in some areas we've made in the last 40 or 50 years since I was a kid and way before you were born. And certainly what we heard at this hearing would indicate that we really need to take a look at what government's role is in trying to help women get to where we thought they were headed 40 years ago, sort of by, I guess, organic change, and it just hasn't happened. So the bills that we heard, the first and probably the biggest one, I would say, is pay equity. And back when I was a kid, the big move was women make 69 cents on a dollar, and pay equity back then was, over the next number of decades, we need to get that equal. Well, here we are 40 years later, and women are now making on average 80 cents on the dollar. And that's on jobs that are compatible. So we heard hearings, and I think we will be passing, we exec out of the committee, a bill about pay equity, which at the beginning is not going to mandate anything. It's just going to ask employers to take a look at the men and women in their workforce and see whether pay equity exists. So that bill was exec out, but it hasn't really been taken up in either house. The bill that we immediately exec out and then passed on the Senate side and is going to the House now is one that addresses the number of women in power and leadership positions in corporations here in Massachusetts. And even though women make up about 48% of the workforce, on boards of directors and boards of trustees, women only account for less than 15%, that's 15% of participation. So this bill, and it's sort of pathetic, the goals of the bill, if you want my opinion, but at least it's a step, would mandate or ask, it's not a mandate, it's a request, that corporations with 8 or less directors have at least 2 women on the board, and with 9 or more have at least 3 women on the board. And you would have to agree that that's a pretty weak goal, actually, after all these years of fighting for equality, that, the request is that only 25% be made up of women, but the reality is now we're at 15%, so I guess that's a step. And that bill was passed by the Senate. And what it sets a goal that by 2018, those targets be met on boards of directors.
Right, and certainly, as much as that I do want to see more diversity, and especially gender diversity and gender equality, it does concern me, when you make it a mandate to say, well, we have to have women. So it sometimes that concerns me that perhaps other board members, maybe male board members, say, well, she's just on here because we had to bring a woman on.
You know what, I have to say, and yes, I agree with you, mandates make me nervous, but if you were my age, and again, I have 3 daughters right now, and you looked at the lack of progress that we've made being nice about this over the last 40 years, I guess I need somebody to tell me without mandates in a credible way how we're going to get from point A to point B. I totally agree with you. I don't like mandates, especially ones that sort of create the appearance of tokenism. But, you could have the same argument about affirmative action, Sarah, and there are people who think affirmative action wasn't necessary. But this is a form of affirmative action, and again, somebody needs to tell me how we're going to move the needle if we don't take steps like this. So do I like it? No, I don't. I wish things organically would take care of themselves. But the evidence is in, and over my lifetime, women are just not doing in the workplace and in our economy what I think many of us who are in their 50s and 60s now would have thought they would be doing a generation ago. So we have to do something, unless you think that steady state is okay. I don't think.
No, I think we absolutely we do have to do something. And what concerns me, I think, the most is that pay equality. It just absolutely blows my mind that in 2015, a man and a woman doing the same job are getting paid at different rates. It's quite frankly disgusting. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense to me at all.
You know, one of the other bills we heard was a pregnancy accommodation bill. I mean, if there's any embarrassing and sort of unbelievable reality that exists, it is the lack of accommodation that's made at the workplace for women who are pregnant. And again, one have to look at it and say it's only because the rules are being made by a majority of people who happen to be men and never experienced pregnancy. But we heard one testimony after another of women who, when they were pregnant, were either relieved of duty and not brought back, or not accommodated and had serious medical issues as a result of being asked to continue to work through the pregnancy. Why do we need government to mandate and insist on common sense? But, you know, women do get pregnant, right? And it's a reality. And if employers are not doing the right thing on their own, then I think it's appropriate for government to say, we're not going to penalize the half of our population that gets pregnant because that's what you know, that's who has the kids in our society. And if businesses don't do it on their own, I think it's legitimate for government to step in and intercede.
Absolutely, for certain. So we talked about some of those highlights. Is there another bill that's part of all of this that you wanted to mention, Senator?
So the four bills that I think really took center stage during the hearing were the pay equity bill, which again, no mandates, but hopefully we're going to take some steps in the right direction. Bill that we talked about, which is women on board and in executive positions, the pregnancy accommodation bill, and the fourth is violence in the workplace, not specifically a gender bill, but when you start to look at violence in the workplace, way more than half of it is directed against women. So while it doesn't specifically stand out as a gender bill, I will tell you, violence at the workplace disproportionately affects women. We heard from a slew of nurses who want to see mandated, again, protection at the workplace because especially with patients with mental health issues, there's a vulnerability and a reality at the workplace that is not being addressed very often by employers. So those were the four bills, and all of them now have been execed out favorably from the committee. Some of them have gone to the House and some have gone to the Senate, and I'm going to work hard to see that they get traction.
Absolutely, and hopefully someday work towards a more equal playing field. And again, as we said earlier, 2015, can't believe we're not there already.
No, it sort of left me speechless. It was 7 hours of testimony, and at that testimony, I sort of stopped the hearing and said, you know, my wife has always said, if you want to see how a society is doing, see how the women are faring, and that's a pretty good indication. And I'll tell you, it's pretty embarrassing, actually, where we are.
Well, Senator, I thank you so much, as always, for joining us here on Barnstable this morning. A pleasure to have you on our program, and we will check in with you again in a couple of weeks. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks much. Bye-bye. Cape and Island State Senator Dan Wolf joining us as he does every other Tuesday morning.